Hey, what's up, everybody? Good evening. Welcome to another episode of the Victorious Ones podcast, the place where gaming meets comics, meets sports, meets movies, as well as inspiration. Of course, I'm your host, King Von Jr. You can follow me on social media on Twitter/X at 301 King Von Jr. You can follow the show's Twitter/X page, if you will, at Victory Pod One. I'm also on Instagram at Mr. King Von Jr. You can follow me. You can also follow the show's Instagram page at Victorious Ones Podcast. I'm also the social media producer for Perfect Plex Talk Radio, hosted by a friend of the program, Mike Knox. And so, of course, I also write articles as well. Hey there. Thank you very much for tuning in. Like I said, I also write articles at the Victorious Ones Podcast.wordpress.com. And of course, you look for merch, just a little cheap little plug, if you will. Done. Something. Of course, victoriousones.bigcartel.com for those that are interested. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for those that are watching by way of Twitter, as well as youtube.com/Avon Rexford Jr. But like I said, thank you very much for watching. I know Twitter was kind of bugging last week when I was doing my episode. So thankfully, thankfully it's back up. And I know that when I just did, when I just had my side note, when I did my upgrade on my phone, I noticed that they got rid of, the Elon got rid of the recently, frequently used gifts. I was like, come on now, like that wasn't cool. But other than that, most importantly, a lot of things I want to talk about, of course, AwesomeCon. This past weekend that just happened. So I won back-to-back cons. Congratulations to me. Like I said, went AwesomeCon here in DC. Like I usually do. I also want to talk about, of course, the Grammys. Not Grammys, but Oscars. Excuse me. Congratulations to Michael B. Jordan for winning best actor. For his role in Sinners. You know what I mean? So of course, there was the Spider-Man Brandon Day trailer that just released as well. And when it comes to wrestling, especially when it comes to that, of course, several things I want to talk about. We talk about Nikki Blackheart. Congratulations to her, who just signed with apparently just inked a deal with WWE. So she's WWE certified. Great to see that. Of course, we saw the return of the Viper. Vintage, ruthless, vicious Randy Orton. Great to see that. Of course, Monday was 316 day. Shout out to Stone Cold. Of course, we're going to talk about Obafemi attacking Brock Lesnar. CM Punk crashing out for being called a senior citizen, basically, and Booker T's appreciation. But yeah, like I said, as far as of course, number one, starting off right with that, we'll talk about AwesomeCon. AwesomeCon 2026. Enjoyed myself, had a great time. I cosplay as Wolverine, a casual cosplay, if you will, a casual, Wolverine cosplay, not like the typical, Wolverine, a Wolverine costume that you see a lot of people wearing, when it's all yellow and blue, or yellow and brown, and or even not even Old Man Logan. I just had this, really cool Wolverine hoodie. Shout out to Super X Apparel. I got hooked up with that. And so it's based off of his costume from Deadpool versus Wolverine. You know what I mean? So I was like, all right, cool. When I saw that, I said, say no more. And so so that was my go-to. And shout out to Amazon for the Wolverine claws. I thought it was pretty epic. So while I was there was plenty of Wolverine cosplayers I took pictures with. And I think I want to say that the theme pretty much was basically X-Men related. So I saw a lot of Wolverine cosplayers, Rogue cosplayers, some Gambit ones here and there. Of course, like I said, as far as that, Magneto cosplayer, Nightcrawler, you name it. And so, and of course, like the main, I guess pretty much the main attractions for X-Men were the voice actors who were there for autographs and photo ops. So I got a photo op. Shout out to Miss Lenore Zan, who was voice of Rogue from X-Men animated series X-Men '97. So I got a photo op with her. I thought that was great. You know, and of course she's X-Men through and through. She even had an X-Men dress. I was like, all right, so I'm talking about, you know what I mean? So she understood the assignment. So like I said, it was a great experience, cool experience, and you know, one that I'll never ever forget. You know, like many others. You know, and so yeah. So let's see another comment. Lisa Bell, I was a BlurCon, AwesomeCon too. Had a blast of both. Absolutely, same here with me. And by the way, if you don't mind me asking, did you happen to cosplay as well? You know, I mean, but yeah, like I said, as far as that, you know, back to back cons, you know, like at first I was kind of curious, like, you know, why they would schedule, you know, back to back of each other. I know BlurCon's, you know, primary time slot now is moved forward, you know, ever since 2024 is now in March. And you know, and regardless, still gonna have a great turnout anyway. But I can tell that you know that this is starting to, you know, get filled to like running over capacity at this point. Um, but yeah, you know, but when it comes, I'll say it like this: um, BlurCon is more fan driven. AwesomeCon is more industry driven. Now BlurCon's, you know, starting to get, you know, more celebrities, get more celebrity support and endorsement, especially with Redman being at BlurCon this year, Zazie Beats, you know what I mean. So definitely, you know, beefing up their you know, the clientele, if you will. But you know, but as far as that, primarily BlurCon is more fan driven, especially when it has more of a cookout type of atmosphere. Whereas AwesomeCon is, you know, like, you know, very much, you know, industry driven. We have, you know, more high profile names showing up at AwesomeCon because that's more of the DC version of what uh, um, San Diego Comic Con and New York Comic Con are. As DC AwesomeCon is DC's equivalent, as I've said before. But you know, but like you know, but like I say, you know, in terms of that, I agree with Lisa. Had a blast in both of them. Great time in both of them. Now, as far as, you know, and of course, I definitely got the most out of my cosplay when it came to photo shoots. Somehow I missed, you know, the whole X-Men group photo shoot, but that's another story. But yeah, like I said, as far as I'll say this: AwesomeCon has more options when it comes to vendors, when it comes to merch, you know, and definitely I would say you know, I've racked up you know, pretty nicely, you know what I mean, and you know, like, you know, so as far as that, now um, now as far as next year for AwesomeCon, it's going to fall on the same weekend as the NFL draft. So it's definitely going to be an attendance conflict, I believe, for many people. Now, I will say this though: I do plan to go to both. You know, I will say, you know, that the NFL draft is, you know, I have to say, you know, it's going to be first thing I go to. I'm going to prioritize that even more, especially going to be in DC, over there at the National Mall by the Reflecting Pool or whatever. So you know, so it's going to take place over there. So I look forward to going. I'm looking at Thursday, you know, night one, just because just because that's going to be the night of the first round of the draft, which is you know, the main thing that people really pay attention to the most. So after that, after I get that out my system, I think that's when I'm going to, you know, head to AwesomeCon, because at first there was a bit of anxiety with me, but now as I'm starting to strategize and organize a little bit more, I'm like, you know what? Yeah, I think I'm gonna do something like that. So now, and also when it comes to BlurCon, uh, I know next year's theme is going to be wrestling related. So, you know, I've already talked it over, with several other people, fellow cosplayers as well. So the names that I have in mind for cosplay are going to be Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels. So maybe a mashup. I'm thinking about, doing like two nights, so on Friday and Saturday, go for one, go for the other. Depends on, I could choose either or in terms of which one I want to cosplay as, for whatever given night. So yeah, like, as far as cosplay, I mean, that's, I mean, it's not for the faint of heart. It's very fun. It's very engaging. It's very exciting, and there are people who are very dedicated to it. And however you want to cosplay, that's on you. We listen, we don't judge, if you will. Um, but yeah, it's a time for you to, it's like it's pretty much a getaway and escape, if you will, from reality, and gives you the chance to, to be, who you want to be, to be someone that you are normally not, um, and just for the sake of, entertainment and just, excitement. I've seen the excellent to downright eccentric, um, you know, downright eccentric cosplays. Big, small, no matter what. Um, it's very creative. A lot of Easter eggs and context clues behind them, as I said before last week with BlurCon. But yeah, either way, like I said, cosplay and that fandom is phenomenal. And speaking of comics, as I'm still on that theme right now, as you can tell, for those that are watching right now, you see greatest of all time, your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, because um, today the trailer just released for Spider-Man brand new day, and so apparently the official release date has been confirmed for July 31st. And so I can't wait. And I saw cameos, and of course, the main one being the Punisher. We see Bruce Banner. We see we also see a Scorpion. And also appearances by the Hand from Daredevil. And they're also, like I said, playing Easter egg references, even a reference to Amazing Fantasy 15, which was Spider-Man's debut. That's a very iconic cover. We see Spider-Man swinging from swinging from his web in his left hand, and he's saving somebody in his right. You know what I mean? And so yeah. So I'm glad that they that they went with that. I was like, oh, I see what we're doing here with this. And like I said, there's plenty of tributes and fan service in this trailer, and so I look forward to seeing those the way those Easter eggs play out in the movie itself. So yeah, so when it comes to Marvel and just comics, period, fans are eating right now. You know what I mean? Especially when it comes to Marvel fans and Star Wars and Spider-Man fans like myself, we're eating very, very well. And I am very much excited. You know what I mean? So as far as that, so this is definitely going to be, let's just say, when it comes to cinema, as to quote Stringer Bell from The Wire, when it comes to cinema, you tell them boys, we back up. When it comes to Marvel, you tell them we back up. You know what I mean? And so I can't wait. Opening weekend. This is an opening weekend event for me. Just like the Michael movies, going to be an opening weekend event for me. Of course, the greatest of all time, Michael Jackson. So when that movie comes out, going to be in that theater, decked out. Of course, like I said, I'm going to be decked out with my red and black Thriller jacket. I can't wait. So, with that being said, in other news, of course, now it is time for me to go into the week in wrestling, and I meant to acknowledge this. I forgot to acknowledge this last week. Acknowledge this news last week, but we'll make up for it now. Congratulations to Nikki Blackheart for signing with WWE. Congratulations to her. And it's just like, as soon as I saw her on the Indies, I know I'm not the only one who feels this way. But as soon as I saw her, on the Indies, on the internet, on Twitter, first found out about her on Twitter. As soon as I saw her, I was like, she's not going to be in the Indies for long. When it comes to her presentation, when it comes to her image, when it comes to her physique, I mean, that's a draw. That's a moneymaker right there. Like she has it. She has the total package. No Lex Luger, by the way. But she has what it takes when it comes to that star factor, that superstar factor. And when I first saw her, I thought she was a combination of Paige mixed with Rhea Ripley, maybe a little bit mixed with China, if you will. Obviously, without Rhea's tattoos, but when it comes to just like when it comes to that physique, at least early Rhea Ripley before before super skinny Rhea, but that's another story. But yeah, like I said, as far as that, as soon as I saw Nikki, I was like, oh, all right now, I'm impressed, and so congrats to Nikki, and you have a fan right here, King Von Jr., Von Risper Jr. from the Victorious Ones podcast. This podcast will definitely, support and endorse Nikki Blackheart. I don't care. You know what I mean? So, like I said, you definitely have a fan, an endorser, supporter right here, and and that's the way it is. So now, of course, when it comes to Friday Night SmackDown, of course, shout out to those that are watching by way of Twitter and Facebook. Thank you very much. So, with that being said, the main, I say like this, the main things I want to talk about, the highlights, or the main highlight that I want to talk about as far as SmackDown, is when Randall Keith Orton, the return of the Viper, the Apex Predator, the Legend Killer, Randall Keith Orton, as we know it, aka the Reptile of WWE. Them voices were screaming loud and clear in that dude's head, because the way that he went absolutely scorched earth on Cody. I said, we back up. As it's in The Wire, we back up. And so it's just like that vicious side, he tapped into, like a light went off. Like it's like a light immediately went off as soon as he saw that title, and he chose violence. Just like 09, 2017, whatever. Orton, he chose violence. He went there. And the image of him, of course, after he busted Cody open, made him bleed, and he hit him with that concerto, basically, on the announce table, where he had Cody's head seated between the steel stairs, and just, I say, yeah, it's absolute sentiment. It's absolute straight up sentiment. And for Orton to take that chair into the ring, and that same chair they laid Cody out with, he used it to sit down, and he holds the title around his waist with blood on his shirt that says RKO everybody. So much so that WWE has re-released that shirt with that graphic. It's right here. It's got to be number 15. There's too much momentum going for him. It's got to be number 15. I know there are conspiracy theorists who believe that that Drew could get in the way of that, because they feel like Orton versus Cody 1-on-1 is not going to be entertaining enough or whatever. But this right here, Cody's talking about finishing stories. This is a story right here that should have kicked off from the jump. The seeds were already planted from the time that Cody won the title at WrestleMania 40, and Orton was one of the guys, that held it, that held him up. And the way that Randy, the way that Randy looked at that title, and he's been eyeing it for the longest time. So now it is their time to execute. And I know it's only a matter of time. Speaking of long-term booking, side note, I know it's only a matter of time before, Charlotte and Jade finally mix up, and I know that those seeds have been planted, and at the opportune time, something's going to break, something's going to give. But back to this one. I know that my co-host from Monday, Mike, has been venting his frustrations, airing out his grievances when it comes to WWE lately. I felt as though there wasn't a big deal or major point about Orton turning heel. Oh, that was a big deal. That was what changed the climate of SmackDown. Something that so many people have been waiting for, begging for, screaming for. Orton to go back to that side. Orton to tap in to that viciousness, to tap in to that ruthlessness, to tap in to that violence, to tap in to what makes him a supervillain in wrestling. Because of how great he is as a heel, Orton has a strong case for being top five all time in terms of heels. You got Vince, you got Trips, you got Flair, you got Orton, you got Piper. Or rather, you got Vince, you got Trips, you got Orton, Flair, Vince, Trips, Orton, Piper, and Flair. Regardless of the order, that is a solid top five, heels and villains, straight up. You can make a case for that. You know what I mean? Honorable mention, you can even rotate Edge's name in there. But either way, when it comes to greatest villains in wrestling, Randy Orton's name has always has to be in the conversation. And Friday just proved that. Being a heel, that's his legacy, no pun intended. And I know recently on Monday Night Raw, you're supposed to have an interview with him via satellite, and he shut that down. Because he was taking a call in terms of who he was on the phone with. Only time will tell. That will be revealed in time. But I did like the way that he spun Cody's line back on him. When he said, wrestling has more than one royal family. You know what I mean? And so yeah. And it goes to show that that, and of course originally Cody used that as a line against Roman, but and I'll say it like this. Of course, neither the Rhodes or Orton lineage on the same level. It's the Anawanis, the Harts. The Guerreros, Von Erichs, whatever. Not putting them on the same pedestal category as them, but but the thing about it is that they of course they have Orton and Cody both have that connection when it comes to being born into a wrestling family or whatever, and of course achieving the highest honor of being WWE champions, and stepping out of your famous dad's shadow. If anything, Randy Orton eclipsed both his dad and his grandfather combined a long time ago. I know Cowboy Bob's biggest claim to fame was that he was Roddy Piper's bodyguard, his ace. You know, meanwhile, of course, Dusty, his legacy speaks for itself. The American Dream, Gold Dust. We already know about that. Um, but Cody, ended up becoming the next in line to becoming a world champion. And he did just that. He was a two-time WWE champion, well, rather 3 times, excuse me. Rather 3-time WWE champion at this point. 2-time Royal Rumble winner, multi-time WrestleMania main eventer. And so it's going to be another main event this time as well. So so it's technically 5, including those back-to-back main events from WrestleMania 40. So it's 39, 40, back-to-back, 41, 42. Yeah, so that's what it is. And so him and Orton are going to main event night 1 of Mania. And so I look forward to that. I definitely want to see. I'm gonna give it. Give my pick ahead of time. I definitely want to see. See Orton. Definitely want to see him become a 15-time champion. And it'll be historic for Randy Orton and John Cena for both of them to defeat Cody Rhodes in back-to-back WrestleManias. To achieve championship milestones. I know last year for Cena, his milestone was to break Ric Flair's record, and he did just that. In Randy Orton's case, even though it's not a record, but at least he can say that he has surpassed Triple H when it comes to championship reigns. 15-14, right? Now, in terms of the quality of his title reigns, or his impact as a champion combined, I mean, that's a whole nother different conversation altogether. But just to achieve those milestones, those things by themselves are already worthy enough anyway. So like I said, I'm not going to belabor that any longer. But like I said, that was the biggest highlight for me as far as Friday Night SmackDown. Now, of course, Monday was 316 day. Shout out to Stone Cold Steve Austin, the greatest of all time. And so yeah, and matter of fact, I even did, matter of fact, I even did a 316 episode before anyway. You know what I mean? So yeah, so as far as that, in terms of Stone Cold's greatest matches and moments of Stone Cold appreciation, if you will. So I've done that before. But I will say that that it's funny that the 316 day was Monday, because the night before that, I just finished watching WrestleMania 14 when he defeated Shawn Michaels for the WWF Championship. At the time, the first out of 6 championships, and I know that there was. Speaking of 316, I know that recently I've seen posts, about comparing NBA, legends or superstars to WWE wrestlers, right? And who their counterparts were. And so I saw there was one that Jordan's counterpart was Hogan. Everybody saw another one before that where Jordan's counterpart was Stone Cold. So I'll co-sign, the former, when it comes to Jordan and Austin. Reason being is because outside obvious, both of them bald heads, hoop earrings, they, also, also they're both 6-time world champions. The faces of their respective sports. Jordan for basketball in the 90s, he was the face of the NBA in the 90s. Stone Cold when it comes to the WWF, the Attitude Era, even though that was the latter part of the 90s, but still it was the defining era of that decade. That is the era that defined, that decade the most. So by default, Stone Cold might as well say 90s. Yeah, so like I say, they were the defining figures, of their respective sport within the same time frame. ball head, hoop earrings, 6-time world champions, actually defining stars of their generations, and also um, each of them respectively had about roughly 14, 15-year career. But when you look at it in the grand scheme of things compared to some of their peers, you know, who are known for their longevity, you know, uh, Jordan and Austin, didn't really have, super lengthy careers or whatever. They weren't really known for their longevity, but they made the biggest impact within, a shorter time frame compared to others. Uh, the impact that they made, the mark that they left, the stamp that they left, is within a shorter time frame, more condensed time frame. The mark that they left is bigger than those who've had much longer careers than them. Right. Jordan was known for um, uh, not only the the 2 3-peats, but also those retirements in between, which kind of truncate his numbers a little bit. But the mark that he left, what he's accomplished, what he's achieved, the bar that he set so high, you know, um, he has achieved more than guys who have played straight through, guys who've had, 17, 18, 20-year careers or whatever. So he's the blueprint, he's the benchmark. That's what, just when it comes to marketability, all those things. That's why, Jordan is consistently ranked, by a consensus standpoint, is ranked ahead of guys with longer careers, whether it's Kareem, LeBron, dudes like that, right? Um, Whereas with Austin, like I said, even though he had a roughly 15-year career, but when it comes to the grand scheme of things, when it comes to wrestling, especially when it comes to his Stone Cold persona, especially, it's definitely a much shorter um, window compared to guys who've been a particular character for a much longer period of time. So the mark that he left, even within 5 to 7 year run as Austin or whatever, uh, that mark, that impact is even bigger, than someone like someone like Undertaker, who's had a 30-year career as one character alone, 30 straight years as one character by itself. You know, um, he's typically ranked ahead of Taker, typically ranked even ahead of Cena. You know, dude's had a 23-year career. He's uh, 21, 20, 21. More like about 20, 22 of those years at least were him as as John Cena, whether it's thugonomics to Super Cena and things like that. That particular character, whatever. So Cena had spent over 20 years with that particular character, but Austin is typically ranked usually ranked higher than him. Hogan, same thing. Super long career. You know, but Austin, many times, is ranked, like, of course, Austin, many times ranked ahead of him from an all-time scale. They're not that far behind, but still, Ric Flair, same thing, really long career, but from a consensus standpoint, it's typically Stone Cold, who is typically either one A, one B, top 2, 3, whatever, right? Um, but the general consensus I have him is the GOAT, just like I have Jordan is the GOAT when it comes to basketball. So for those reasons, I would say that Jordan's, real counterpart basketball-wise would have to be, like so Austin's, real counterpart from a basketball standpoint would have to be Jordan. You know, so that's just me. But yeah, you know, so and of course, um, as it pertains to Monday Night Raw. You know, some of the of course, like I said, of course, some of the highlights for me. Of course, we saw the return of Seth Rollins, and how we got pulled off that swerve with Brock Lesnar. Where one moment we thought that it was going to be Brock versus Seth, but I still didn't, still held out on the biggest name of them all that was going to show up. Before you know it, before you know the music hit, as soon as, of course, you saw, Obafemi, do his, famous Oba strutter, Oba walk. You know what I mean? I was like, oh yeah, this is just picked up. And speaking of picked up, this dude powerbombed Lesnar, and it looks like Brock's career was flashing before his eyes. I was like, oh man, it's right here. And people pointed out, how Oba shed a tear after he did that. He's thankful for that moment. He's thankful for the elevation. He's thankful to be, placed in that position. Ever since their encounter at the Royal Rumble, I was like, yeah, he's got to face Brock at some point. You got to check it off the list. Gunther, all well and good, but not right now. Not right now. Sucks that Gunther has yet to have an opponent. I guess he's ran out of legends to retire right now, but it's neither here nor there. I know there's obviously Gunther, being the one. But when it comes to WrestleMania, when it comes to really being a moneymaker, a bigger money-making match, the ring general was cool, but when it comes to selling the tickets and putting the butts in them seats, Brock versus Oba, because that's truly a pass on the torch. And I saw a statistic, and it says that Brock Lesnar is 48. So right now, Brock is the same age that that same age that Hogan was when Hogan faced Brock back in 2002. So back then, when Lesnar and Hogan had that match, Hogan was 48, going to 49. We had that match with SmackDown with Lesnar. And at the time, Lesnar was 25. So fast forward, here we are now. Brock is in a position, that Hogan once was. Same age too. 24 years later. Right. Mind absolutely blown. So when it comes to Brock, we can safely say now, just like he said, just like he told Hogan, party's over, Grandpa. You sheriff in town. That sheriff's name is Obafemi. And I can't wait. We might as well say that, and shout to Kofi Kingston. After that happened, he tweeted, avenge us. You know what I mean? So he was calling for Oba to avenge him and every other black champion that has fallen, or black superstar that has fallen at the hands of Brock Lesnar. So for Kofi to say that was no kayfabe. That's how he really felt. So I'm looking to see Oba be the one to be, the generational curse breaker, if you will, what have you. For Oba to be the one to eventually, put Brock right in the ground. And I guess we could say that this was the dream, that the MLK was talking about. So it's time for Oba to let freedom ring from Lagos, Nigeria, to Las Vegas, Nevada, from WrestleMania 42. And I'm excited for it. So the road to WrestleMania has become even more unique than ever before. And we also saw, Becky Lynch attack AJ Lee. Becky has had it. She's frustrated with constantly losing to AJ. So I'm looking at as this to, for WrestleMania to be the point where Becky finally gets, the monkey off her back, the gorilla off her back, or AJ's case, or at least AJ's case, the Black Widow offer at this point. So yeah, and I was like, I think it's gonna be the point, when Becky finally gets a W, because there ain't no way that you're just going to end that feud with AJ winning in a clean sweep. There ain't no way. And for AJ to beat Bailey, for her to make Bailey tap out, I'm like, come on now. The AJ, who was the era before the Four Horsewomen, you had her beat two of the Horsewomen. A little unsettling, to be honest with you. For someone who has had ring rust, for 10 years, someone who has been eclipsed, who's been cleared, by the women that have come after her. The women that have come after her, several of them have already eclipsed her legacy several times over. When you look at, all four of the Horsewomen, from Charlotte, Sasha / Mercedes, Becky and Bailey. You have, of course, Asuka, Bianca, Rhea. Every last one of them. You can make a case. You can make a case for Io also. Each of them have already, have already, flown past AJ from an all-time standpoint. But this is, AJ's little, of course, her return tour, her victory lap, if you will, to make up for all the time that her and Punk have been out of the company. So it's a little feel-good title reign. But eventually it's all going to have to come crashing down. That's all I got to say. Then we have, Roman and Punk, part 4? When it comes to this promo battle, and how, Roman has had, of course, we see the support for the Usos. Everybody, still talking about, Roman not formally apologizing and whatever. At least he said, I'm not going to hold too much against Roman because, in my estimation, Punk is the bigger villain in this situation. Right? So people talk about Roman needing accountability. Keep the same energy with Punk because, he needs to face even bigger accountability. And we see that, Roman is not fazed by Punk's, verbal mind game, the tricks that he tries to do, whatever Jedi mind tricks, CM Punk tries to do. Roman's an even bigger Jedi than him. And he's not fazed. And you could constantly see CM Punk's insecurities starting to scream out. Especially now, it's funny how Punk didn't do anything when Roman said that AJ was the main breadwinner when it comes to merch. That AJ outsold him basically when it comes to merchandise, and Roman, and even before that though, Punk was talking about lifting Roman up on his shoulders and getting, of course, having the strength from all those little Punkamaniacs as you hit Roman to go to sleep. And so once he said Punkamaniacs, I'm like, yeah, dude, you gotta go. You gotta go. That's enough. It's the same dude that was, was talking all that trash about throwing Hogan, talking all the trash earlier about throwing Hogan as an old man Hogan over the top rope, and of of course, kill Hulkamania once and for all, and all this other type of stuff. And then you turn around and call your fans Punkamaniacs. Like, are we for real? So let's turn off right there. That right there, no thank you. And so, Roman continues to, just get in Punk's head and, just dissect him and just expose him for his insecurities. And what really made Punk crash out, what really drew the line, was not only when Roman, saying that, that Punk is not stronger than him, not faster than him, doesn't look better than him, but what really set Punk off was when Roman called him Hulk. And right there, crashed out. That shows Punk's insecurity, his instability, shows that he can easily break himself. And it was great to see, by the way. So, yeah, and Roman got the response that he was looking for. And I think we're getting closer and closer to seeing, Infinity Gauntlet Roman come back. And I'm here for all of it. And so, of course, NXT, they had a Booker T Appreciation Night, and that was interrupted, by interrupted by Keanu Carver, and it was Keanu Carter and Jackson Troy, and so I said, all right, then, and I like the way that even in an appreciation night, even with the celebration, Booker still found a way to elevate, the next generation, the latest talent. Even when it comes to that, I said, yeah, Keanu Carter versus Jasper Troy, they are definitely NXT. They're definitely next in line, and for Booker to give them that validation in that segment and everything. And so, I know like the next NXT Stand and Deliver is going to take place in St. Louis. It's going to be, of course, Sexy Red is going to be going to come back and as a special celebrity guest, whatever. I'm like, of course, even though she has a song that has been going viral because it's been put together with Shawn Michaels dancing. I was like, yeah, that's definitely an endorsement right there. So it's pretty much just whatever. But yeah, pretty much we see the road to WrestleMania is becoming even more intense, and so clearly we're going to see Finn versus Dirty Dom at Mania. That's what it's looking like now. So yeah, and so pretty much another match confirmed. So when it comes to Owen versus Brock, I'm ready for that. Now in terms of when night's going to fall, only time will tell. As we draw closer and closer on this road to WrestleMania, on this road to Vegas. And so, with that being said, that is going to be the conclusion for tonight. And before I go, I'd like to give birthday shout outs. And of course, a happy belated birthday to Trisha Dora. Of course, a DC wrestling legend, if you will. Of course, indie wrestling legend from DC. Of course, this past Friday, she turned 37. And as far as this week's birthday is March 16th, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the legendary Flavor Public Enemy, turned 67. On the same day, Clifton Powell, better known as Pinky from Friday, among many other roles, turned 70. March 17th, Kurt Russell turned 75. Pat Riley turned 81. March 18th, Queen Latifah, of course, turns 56. Vanessa Williams turned 63. March 19th, Bruce Willis turned 71. March 20th, of course, my mom's birthday. Of course, Miss Wanda Resper turned 72. On the same day, Sting turned 67. Spike Lee turns 69. Michael Rappaport turns 56 on March 21st. Sinead Ogwumike turns 34. And that is it for the birthdays. And before I go, I'd like to give a word of wisdom. And it is that, you know, God has more for your life than what you're employed to do. You know, and the thing about it is that God will give you a passion to make an impact. And whatever bothers you is an indication that God has called you in that area to make a change. And this comes from a pastor's a sermon, discovering and knowing your purpose. You know, and the thing is, when God gives you purpose, He will open doors of opportunities. And of course, He'll give you provisions to fulfill your assignment, and that you will have opposition. But at the same time, even with that, you know, God will place partners, you know, at the right place, right time for you to fulfill your purpose. And also always remember that always remember that you're victorious because greater is He that is in you than He that is in the world. When you put God in first place, you don't have to worry about being in last place. Please make sure you listen to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere else that you download podcasts. I'm also on YouTube.com, of course, youtube.com/@Von Virginia. Please, and of course, thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for watching. And may this day be the absolute very best day of your life.